So we are now going to talk about our redemption film, or was it really that bad? Which is Vanilla Sky. So we definitely need to give some context of this film because
Good luck.
Because
Jesus Christ,
it
get
just
in there.
it just needs some context. Okay, so the first things first is we got to talk about Tom Cruise for a second, and I think we should do it at the beginning. Tom Cruise, this is 2001. 1996, he does Mission Impossible and Jerry Maguire. He's nominated for an Oscar for Jerry Maguire, and his career is just shifted in this path that was going from Born on the 4th of July and A Few Good Men, and now it's headed back into he is the number one leading man in the world, 1996. Then all of a sudden he does Eyes Wide Shut in 1999, and everybody's like, oh, that's where he's going with this. Okay. And Magnolia, of course, for our Paul Thomas Anderson friends. 2000, he does Mission Impossible 2, which, can we just buzz? I don't know.
Yep.
Let's just buzz Mission Impossible 2, 2000. Okay. So then he does 2001, he does Vanilla Sky. Cameron Crowe, who wrote and directed Jerry Maguire for Tom Hanks, but I guess Tom Cruise was a nice substitute. And it's about a rich, wealthy playboy who was young. He inherited a publishing fortune from his family. He runs 3 magazines. He lives in New York's Upper West Side in the famous Dakota Hotel, which is the hotel John and Yoko Ono lived in. Yoko still owns it. Very, very famous. Huge apartment, wealthy. He drives a Ferrari and a Mustang. Obviously, it's like you need someone like Tom Cruise to pull this off. And he teams up with Cameron Crowe again. Cameron Crowe, Almost Famous, Say Anything. This is a guy that used to write for music magazines. So the score is awesome. Within 7 minutes, you have REM and Radiohead. So this is somebody that is ready for this score to be awesome. And what it's about is this wealthy playboy is trying to figure out sort of who he is. He's sort of at a crossroads of becoming an adult. I think he's 33 in the film, although I don't know if you ever actually believe that Tom Cruise is 33.
Yeah, he's 33.
Again, yeah, he's supposed to be 33. Makes me really sad.
Hasn't that caused some discussions on the internet? But yeah.
Yes. And he gets into a car accident that disfigures him. And with the drugs that he's given and everything, time, his thoughts, everything sort of becomes a dream or a nightmare. So really, this film, which is based on a Spanish film that is titled Open Your Eyes, which becomes a huge theme in this movie, which actually starred Penelope Cruz, who co-stars in Vanilla Sky. It's basically, is he alive? Is he dead? Is it a nightmare? Is it a dream? That's the whole thing. They don't even try to pretend like that's not going on in the movie. They don't even try to sneak it in. It is very obvious this whole movie might be a dream. It might be a reality. What is reality? It's laid on very, very early that that's happening. And the disfiguration sort of leads you down a Twilight Zone segment, right? So this car crash happens and his face is messed up, so he's no longer pretty or handsome. And he thinks everybody's out to get him. He's going through these delusional nightmares. So it is listed as an erotic thriller. I'm going to go ahead and spoil that for you. It's neither erotic nor thrilling, but I understand. I'm not the only person who said that. I did think that when I saw that. I was like, this is an erotic or thrilling. And then I saw another review that said that, so I have to shout them out, fuckers. But it's not erotic or thrilling. Eyes Wide Shut is an erotic thriller. This is not an erotic thriller, but it is in that, not supernatural, but it's in that elements of dream versus reality really, really, really well. It's very, very interesting. And it's playing with Tom Cruise's public image to the point where he actually got divorced to Nicole Kidman during the filming of this movie and had to announce it to the cast, and it was like almost a part of the movie. Like he had to announce the cast, and then they like started shooting, and it just seemed almost like it was, is that real or not? You know, it's like that almost seemed like it was part of the movie. It's very trippy. So anyway, the fact that Tom Cruise is the lead of this movie is very, very important, is the moral of the story. Yeah. Supporting characters: Penelope Cruz, Cameron Diaz. Long story short, reality versus fiction. Forget about the plot. Who wants to go first with this one?
Penelope Cruz stole the show for me.
Right. She was fucking good in this. And very different than what I usually see her in.
Yeah.
She's very different than what you usually see her in.
She is a breath of life. She's like the epitome of someone who just enjoys every single moment. And it was such a great role to see her play. Like, I've never seen her do that before, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, she was like sweet and sincere and kind
So
and
alive.
nice and
We have so many
curious.
ties to the Spanish speaking world, you guys. She is Pedro Almodovar's muse.
Yeah.
He discovered her, and I mean, I don't like that word, but she worked with him early, so like I've seen her in so much of his work. This was the first time that she really exploded here, and you know, I think it was well earned. I think most people who've seen this movie, even when we saw it back then, if people who saw it back then, people spoke positively about her performance and Cameron Diaz. I don't think anyone had an issue with either of their performances. There's some issues with the movie though. So I kind of want to start with this question to you guys. All of us have seen this movie before. I think all of us saw it when it came out.
I hadn't.
Oh, really?
I've never
Oh,
seen
I
this
thought you said you saw it.
No,
My bad,
I've
dude.
never seen this before.
What was that like watching it for the first time? Because I was about to talk to you about doing the rewatch because I hadn't seen it since it came out.
Keep going, and I'll throw my stuff into the end.
Well,
Oh, okay.
so going into it this time, knowing what it was about, Jeff, same boat. Did you feel like you kind of knew, you remembered, like, I know he's like, spoiler alert, obviously, like, sorry, whatever. He's after the incident with the car crash, you find out that the most of the movie he's trapped inside his mind in a lucid dream. So
Yeah.
you're watching this whole thing play out. So I obviously you don't forget that. So you remembered that going back into it again. What was it like for you, Jeff, watching it for the rewatch in terms of one, big picture, Cameron Crowe directing? Do you think he walked us into that and executed the play out of it
Right.
pretty well, or did you feel like it was too indicative, or did you actually appreciate it a little bit more on a rewatch?
You know what's really funny is I literally wrote down in here, very curious to hear what John and Dave say, having done some work in psychologically confused protagonist work. So it's funny that you're asking me this first, because I literally was like, I'm not the expert on the panel about this. But what I will say is this is definitely a movie that if you rewatch Friends, which I recommend that you do, there is a lot of very entertaining stuff in this movie. So it is definitely not a bad movie. But as far as your question, what did I think about the psychological thing about all that? I think it is important to note that Cameron Crowe has said, I wanted it to be a sort of choose your own adventure of how deep you wanted to go in as a viewer, where if you just wanted a surface level kind of romantic comedy, you could get that. And if you wanted something deeper, you could get that too. Or if you rewatch it,
and if you're a regular user, of Reddit, you can see some people have chosen their depth.
Yeah.
Holy
And so
crap,
if you really want to
hole.
go in there, that's great. As far as just watching it the first time, I don't think there's a way that the depth is psychologically like you get pulled in. You know what I mean? So I think as an audience, you have to do the work for some of that depth, because maybe it's just now, maybe it's been 20 years that it's just not that, it's not that crazy to be in this mind field
exactly.
like that. Like, it's not that scary or interesting that it's like, oh my God, is this a dream or is it a reality? Honestly, about halfway through the movie, I'm like, I wonder if they're just going to tell me if it is or not. Like, I'm not sitting there going, gee, I need to start picking up on the context.
All right, so see, that's the problem, though. That's the problem with this movie is that when you, and again, he did adapt this basically from a famous Spanish film. But when you pitch this idea, you're like, super compelling, interesting concept. Like, the idea is good. So this is another one of those things of how are we going to play this out? I'm Cameron Crowe in 2001. A lot of people are going to come see this and think it's a mainstream film. I cannot help but mention, we don't have to go into it at all, but this is the same year that David Lynch released another masterpiece, Mulholland Drive, where he deals with somebody that is trapped inside a dream.
That's awesome.
And I'm not saying it's the only way to do dreams. There's different ways to approach that kind of thing. But I mean, my biggest problem with Vanilla Sky is that it is compelling, but I feel like it's a little manipulative. As much as I love this soundtrack, I get a little nervous whenever I hear an incredible soundtrack and the movie's not as good as the soundtrack as it's going along. I start feeling like, okay, they had access to the money to put fucking Radiohead, Sigur Rós, Bob Dylan, REM, everybody in this fucking soundtrack with back to back.
McCartney wrote the theme song. He got McCartney to write the song.
McCartney wrote this theme song. Yeah. So that by the time it reached the end for me, where it really started playing out, where there were already moments where he had to catch the audience up because this was trying to attract a mainstream audience. Again, unlike Lynch and people who I think have navigated the dream, we don't want you to know if this is real necessarily world until you either have to figure it out for yourself or until we give you enough information to make some kind of assumption. Cameron Crowe I'm curious because I don't even want to blame him. I'm curious if he felt like he needed to put it in the script the way he did, because by the end of this movie, he literally explains
Yeah.
everything to you.
Yeah, everything.
And everything that is interesting about movies and stories that have to do with dreams is that there's room for you to project your own opinion on whether or not this was real or that was real or how that made you feel. You had to discover it for yourself. So just as a perfect example, and again, this is a spoiler alert, but they tell you exactly the moment when the dream begins. At the end of the film, they tell you when the dream began in the film. And you think back and you're like, I know exactly when that moment was. If they had not said that, this movie would be 10 times better.
But
if they had not
even
told you
though
exactly
they've
when
said
the
that,
splicing happened,
there's still
What's up?
arguments going on now about
Yeah, and they
exactly
fucking said it,
what
yeah.
was happening in this movie.
Yeah.
Like they're
Yeah.
disregarding the fact that was said. Like, sure, that was said, but was that part of the
Yeah.
dream? Like, it's almost like Inception. Like with the ending, it's like, was he in it or was he out of it?
but at least
but
Chris
it
never
wasn't like
fucking.
Inception.
At least Chris explains to you what's happening when they go into dreams, and he literally. All right, that's a perfect example. Let's talk about that. Leonardo DiCaprio's character in Inception tells you exactly what he did with Mauve. Is that her name? Mauve.
Maud.
I can't remember her name.
M-A-U-D. It's
Maud.
Marion Cotillard.
Yeah.
He tells you exactly what happened to them in the past. He does not tell you what is happening to him right now in the present, which is literally what they choose to do with
Yeah.
tech support that catches you up and explains. It's almost like they wanted you to feel like, in case you didn't understand what this movie was about, we're going to remove all the mystery and we're going to explain it to you. And you get to
Right.
decide if you want to
Right.
jump off the side of a building too when
Yeah.
this fucking
Well,
movie's over.
just so that we don't come across like we're badgering our audience who probably has not seen this movie recently, and that I don't want them to think like, why are you? I don't even know that this movie is. Why are you yelling? Just to really explain what we're talking about. I also took a note about the music, John, because I wrote down that the music felt a lot more like a 1990s Drew Barrymore rom-com. Like it was. I said, yeah, no, that's fine. For instance, actually, he does. So obviously, he has skill because we know that there's a car crash, and then very early in the movie, the car spins out of control into an intersection, and that's not the car crash. So he basically does that kind of audience gotcha. That's what you get for just assuming that the title, the tagline, you know everything about the movie. So he knows what he's doing. But then when he actually gets in the car with Cameron Diaz, who's his, F buddy, a lot of the dialogue feels like a two-hander play, so it's very
after
heavy-handed.
everything we've said on
It's
this
not
show, did you just
naturalistic.
say F, buddy? Are you trying
I
not to
was
get
gonna count out
grounded?
too.
Are you
You're not on family
Are you
vacation
gonna buzz
anymore,
me for
bitch.
not? Are you gonna buzz me for not cursing? Is that-
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so his fuck buddy Cameron Diaz, but he's actually in love with Penelope Cruz, who we only met once. So none of it's realistic because the whole thing is like, you've only met her once, bro. Like, ask her out again. Like, the more you hear about it, it's like, I knew from that one day that love was possible, and it was like,
I think I could
buy
fall in
this.
love.
Well,
I think I may have fallen in love with Penelope Cruz if I had met
okay,
that
fine.
character once.
Touche. But back to the music here. So they do the thing, which is pretty clever. So you can see Cameron Diaz, and he doesn't want to get in the car with her, and then she talks him into it. And of course, it's like he sits there for a second and he goes, okay, I'm going to decide to get in the car. And it's the last bad decision he ever makes. And then the music is like the cheery. It's actually Cameron Diaz is singing on the soundtrack. It's actually her song. But it's like a chipper, cheery music. And then the car crash happens. Okay, so maybe Cameron Crowe doesn't want to give us any depth. He just wants it to be like, kind of fun. And then he gets out of the car and there's this like American Beauty type like guitar, like whatever ethereal stuff going on. And then there's Penelope Cruz there, who it's clearly not her. Like, there's no question. Like, clearly he didn't just get out of the car and this girl that he's obsessed with just happens to be in the middle of Central Park. So it's not even pretending to be in reality, but it also tries to like show him as if it's real. And the music is very lush and it's very light. So anyway, moral of the story is what I'm saying about the music specifically is it's proof that the director doesn't know what the depth is, and he doesn't know what the movie is supposed to feel like, so he's punting. And I know Cameron Crowe. Okay, fine. I'm an amateur here. I am certainly I would not consider myself to be a professional filmmaker, even the way that you two are. But this is Cameron Crowe when he says to me, you can get out of this movie whatever you want. The depth is there if you want it. I'm just gonna play some really fucking fun music, and this shit's gonna happen, and whatever you want. That's punting, and I think you need to make a choice, and you need to go for it. And I don't think he did. And it's too bad because there's some good stuff there, and there's some entertaining things in here.
Yeah,
it just
for
doesn't
sure,
have the
dude.
depth. It just doesn't have the depth.
Dave,
what I would
what did
say.
you think,
Dave,
dude? Your
go
first
ahead.
watch, man. Like, get in there.
I had a
dude.
great experience with this movie. All right.
All right.
I actually-
You knew we were gonna
I-
go here.
no,
go
I
ahead.
was- I was-
It's very entertaining
The
film.
funny
it really
thing
is
is,
an
I was
entertaining film.
I heard so many people like bag this movie out, or like so many people like, yeah, I didn't go see it, and I was expecting absolute crap, and I came,
It's not.
I
It's not
came
crap.
in,
It's not crap.
and
It's not.
I was like pleasantly surprised. I was really, really pleasantly surprised. I think Penelope Cruz is a breath of life in this movie. Tom Cruise
Yeah.
gives his
He's an awesome
his-
camera actor. He
Yeah,
really
his
is.
phenomenal performances as he always does. Cameron Diaz is just a fucking psycho.
This is maybe
Um,
this is one of her better performances.
yeah,
really. Like,
and-
she's
I think
really
so, too.
she's good.
And-
Small role, but she's good.
Kurt Russell,
Yeah,
like, dude,
and,
like,
and
yeah,
who knows what was on the page for that guy? Like,
yeah,
and whatever he was working
but
with.
like,
Not great
see,
lines. Yeah, that was some poorly written
it's a movie
dialogue.
like in the first 5 minutes, you're like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah.
And so you're set up for that sort of environment. And I went along for the ride. I was like, what the fuck is going on? And then like this, like I can see why people didn't get this because it takes some really sharp left turns that people might not be ready for. It's like you're going along one track and suddenly bam, you're somewhere else.
yeah.
But like I said, all that is explained. So that's a payoff for the setup in my book. So when
Have you? Okay. Sorry, keep going, dude.
Yeah,
We just talked
like
about
when
I'm
we
sorry.
get like when we
Keep
get to the elevator right at the end, it is a payoff for everything you've gone through. It's like, why is this happening? Why? Like,
Yeah, but
what
don't
is
you
going
feel like-
on? And it's a payoff for a setup that then gives you a further payoff for the ending of the movie.
So
And-
I think the setup is good. I'm totally on board for the beginning of this film.
Yeah, I think it ends
But-
well. It ends well.
I see. I don't. I feel like the dream. Whenever you're messing with that dream aspect, the weirdest part about dreams, and I think the reason they translate so well to movies, the reason this happens all the time. People mess with dreams all the time in cinema. It's such an obvious parallel. Is that you can never be confident that you're dreaming in a dream. The reason it's always compelling, the reason Inception, and David Lynch
But
and all that
that's
stuff
the whole
completely
point of a
works.
lucid dream. That you are confident you're dreaming, you can control it. That's what a lucid dream is.
Then I think they sacrificed the greatest storytelling aspect. They sacrificed the mystery and the suspense of coming from, if he had to jump off that building at the very end of this movie, not 100%, it would have been more interesting. It
Yeah,
wouldn't have been a complete acknowledgement of his reality, because the whole point is that it's not actually real. If he had to do it on a leap of faith because he was whatever, if he was scared or he wasn't 100% sure.
Like at that point, I still wasn't 100%. And isn't that where it's supposed to be? It doesn't matter if he's 100%. Like I wasn't 100%. Like, is this real?
That's a good
Like,
point.
I
is
was
it-
150%. That was
Yeah, no,
100,000%.
On a first watch, I was like, is this something else? Like, is there another twist? Or like, and finally, when he got to the point where he made the jump, sure, I was like, okay, this is going to happen. And like, yeah, that needs to happen. But up until that point, they were still throwing spanners. Like, one of the things I loved was Kurt Russell's moment of realization on the roof. He nailed that. Like when they're standing on the roof, and he like just suddenly this outburst of like, mortality is home entertainment. This can't be the future.
Yeah,
And I
I
was
think
like,
that was an
yeah.
actor going, I need to make this line good.
Yeah, and he did. He did.
His entire performance.
I mean,
Trying
I
to
think
just
I think
work
one
his
of,
ass off
one of
with
the things
them.
that really nailed this film, like nailed it to the wall for a lot of people, was Tom Cruise had just come off Mission Impossible 2, and straight after they
Yeah.
did Minority Report, and this is not what everyone was expecting out of Tom Cruise when it
True.
came out. So anyone who did go and see it is like, oh, this is not what Tom Cruise does.
It has
And
a lot of those
it's
Jerry
l-
Maguire
it's-
close-ups
it's-
too, so
it's
it's almost
liter-
like
but
playing
it's-
with you.
It's literally the polar opposite of those two films. And then also, this was released like Lord of the Rings came out 4 days after this, and Ocean 11 came out the week before.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
it never stood a chance.
It didn't stand a chance, but it's definitely, I don't know. I remember the whole time I was because again, like I couldn't help but think like I'm rewatching this. I remember kind of trying to remember how I felt about it initially, and then picking it apart a little bit with this time. But also, like I'm with you, Dave. Like I had a good time up until I started to feel frustrated, and I think a lot of it was I'm going to blame Cameron Crowe. I don't think he had caught clearly he had never messed with material like this. But I was trying to get as simple as possible. I was trying to get down to like, what is the quintessential issue with how he is choosing to tell this story? And I kept coming back to the intermittent scenes between Tom Cruise and Kurt Russell in present day, quote, reality. You think it's his reality for most of the movie, where he is being interviewed by Kurt Russell's, did I say Russell Crowe?
No,
Doesn't matter.
That's Kurt Russell's psychologist character for because
because
he's been
Kurt Russell's
charged
like,
with
you want to
murder.
fight, mate?
He's the police psychiatrist.
Yeah, and it was again, I don't even like using this word because like Chris Nolan knows how to produce a film with all the sexy bells and whistles, but it felt overproduced to me. I felt like when he was writing the script, I felt like he wanted it to be super grounded and kind of gritty and a little bit uncomfortable with the realism to try to keep that tone of we're not sure because Tom is not sure. I mean, it basically is Tom Cruise, whatever his character's name is, David,
Yeah.
It's Tom
whatever
Cruise.
his name is.
He plays
And I remember-
Scientologist Tom Cruise.
And I remember just thinking, this is just it's too much.
Yeah, I heard that.
I remember just thinking it's too much. They're doing too many camera movements. The coverage is out of control. They're overproducing this film when the crux of the story only exists in whether or not he knows it's happening to him or not. And I feel like they were doing so many things with the filmmaking that made me, Jeff, I'm so glad you said that comment because that's exactly how I felt. I made this movie so that if you don't want to go deep, you can enjoy the music.
Yeah,
And if you do want to go deep, you're more
I mean,
like, all right, well
that's the
then
other thing,
that
like,
means we're in shallow fucking water.
You're saying you didn't know
That
how
means
to
we're
deal
not
with this
trying to go all the
material,
way.
and that's not true at all. There are, if you go back, there are so many hints throughout this movie as to what's going on. Like,
But
there's-
it's cerebral. It's not visceral. Yeah,
but
technically,
there's,
if
like,
you're
visual
looking
hints.
closely and you
There's
really
musical
want to
hints.
do the math.
Every single song in this movie has significance to what's going on.
No, I saw that. There's the one.
But if
where
you
it's
can
like,
recognize that, then it doesn't work.
what's the one? There's a nursery rhyme where the
But you
next
only
line is
recognize
something
that
about
afterwards.
like, and they like London
There's-
bridges all fall,
there's-
and it
there's
all
little-
falls down.
There's little
Um,
things that just pop out at you, and you're like, "What's that about?" And then afterwards, you sit and
No,
think about it, and it's
so-
like,
I know what
okay.
you mean. Those
Here-
little things, but those little things with the music, the needle drops, they worked better for me than the constant. Here's popular music and the best music of our day. I feel like if he had taken it back and used about 50% of those needle drops, it would have been extremely effective. It just
Right.
at a point it got kind of old where I was like, my God, how many genius current contemporary recording artists can he shove into this soundtrack? It was just so.
And they
Yeah.
did all have hints, but the film was it got clever. But here, actually, I have a question about the crux of this here. So I talked a lot that I just thought like he wasn't making it for somebody to have a visceral film experience. It was much more cerebral, and I don't even really know how cerebral it was. Maybe if you wanted it to be, it was, but whatever. If you got a piece of paper, maybe it would have been a nice night of homework. But, okay. But back to the line about
Got a piece of paper.
Fucking
back
slide
to
rule.
But the one thing that this seems to be coming down to, which is what a lot of people say holds back films like Interstellar, which I love as a film, but it's like at the end it's just love. Like I feel like with Tom Cruise's character, what it comes down to after the crash and everything, it's he's trying to find himself, but ultimately it's all about love. Like, does he love Sophia? Does he love the idea of what actual love is? Is that the reason he's alive? Is it to find beauty in art and love? And it's like, does he want the power play? Does he want himself? And I feel like it's just all centered around like love is great, so therefore it's worth living or something. Did you get a vibe like that? This is a question. I don't have an answer to this because for me, I was like, it's getting, even though you can get as deep or whatever you want with this film, but ultimately it just seems like this simple, like this guy knows that love is great and that's more important than money, so therefore jump off a building. Like I kind of felt like it got a little shallow.
It's like and I'm trying to think. I can't remember exactly which religious preference has it, but they used a similar concept for the ending of Lost, where after you die, you go to a limbo perspective.
It's Hinduism.
It's the Hinduism.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you go to a limbo perspective where you fix everything that's wrong with your life, and then you're ready to move on. And I feel like
But
this
before
was the
that,
point.
he
Like,
didn't fix anything that was wrong with his life. It was just like, you know what? love is great. I don't think he really fixed his self-indulgent ways.
He put
in that
himself
limbo.
through something that made him then want to live again because he wanted to die.
Yeah, and the only
And
thing that made
he
him
put
want to live was
himself through
love.
something
But see-
that brought him
but
to
see,
a
Dave,
place
I'm not
where he
even-
wanted to live.
I'm not even going to disagree with that in terms of if we were to talk about this abstractly with story, you're right. Like the idea of, oh my God, how do we get his dream to turn into a nightmare? Climaxing with her murder. Like it's intriguing. It is
Yeah.
very compelling when he does that. But then they tell you exactly what happened. And he understands it 100%. So he loses all of his fear. So that at the end of that moment, which I think, Jeff, I know what you mean. Like sometimes it can be a real cop out when you're dealing with this kind of material and you say, oh, all of this stuff can be answered by love. Even though that might be true, I think good stories have showed us that you can pull that off and it can be true. But when he is on that roof at the very end and the tech support guy says, your audience is here to watch you leave. And he makes amends with all of them. And the last one he makes amends with is her, where he understands so completely what he was doing with her this entire time. I felt absolutely no curiosity for what was going to happen to him when he jumped off that roof, because he answered all of his questions. And I mean, this is a personal thing maybe, but like when you wake up out of dreams, I think the most intriguing part about dreams, even the ones that seem like, oh my God, they were so real, I thought it was happening to me, it was like so real, is that you do not have all the answers. In fact, they tend to play on really base emotional instincts that are not based in any type of catharsis. They usually bring up a lot of issues and make you act with like really primal kind of base instincts. And it usually leaves you very confused when you wake up. That's why you say, oh my God, I can't believe it was so real. Nobody wakes up out of a dream and says, I just answered every single question I've ever fucking had.
Yeah, I don't know where to go from there. That's
Yeah,
true.
I mean,
I think you're both right because Dave,
Yeah.
I'm with you. This movie was it was very entertaining. It really was, and ultimately, some
It was
people are just going to
definitely
be
a
happy
pleasant
that he
surprise.
jumped off the building and then you're going to bed, and it's like good movie, great,
Yeah,
moving on with my life.
I mean, the takeaway from this is 42% tomato meter. Go fuck yourself, Rotten Tomatoes. This is a great film that pulls you into its narrative and then hits the spin cycle for me.
Great's a strong
So,
word,
yeah.
but I do
The-
appreciate that support.
You would really call this a great film?
I would.
Because I'm not
I would call it a
shitting on
great
it, dude.
film. I really enjoyed it.
We're being surprisingly negative.
I feel
but
like the
ultimately,
audience
it
score
was
of
very
72
entertaining.
is way more accurate.
72 is good. Okay, 72, we can see.
Yeah.
Film fans, our handles are in the episode description. Tell us what you think of Vanilla Sky, even
Yeah.
if you haven't seen it in a while.
Come at
We're
me.
very curious to hear what you hear about it. Support Dave. Give John and I shit. Let's do it. 72
Yeah.
is pretty good.
All right.
John would probably give it a 48. I'd probably give it a 72. Dave would probably give it a 90. We're all over the place.